And you can actually check that at the university level because there is the safe assignment. So you can upload, a paper of yours or a manuscript and run it against the database. And it will, or even just take a snippet of a sentence and plug it into Google. And Google, if it finds that snippet of a sentence somewhere else, it'll let you know where it found it. You guys seem more cautious than I would say on the other end, but I would recommend, because I see this both in proposals and in manuscripts of, this is the first time ever, or the very first description of, and it may be in that particular species, but it comes across, it usually is not the first time ever, and not that that's not important work, but you don't need to use the first time ever, or just, this is what we did. Whether it's the first or not, people will realize its importance. And it's usually, and the sad part is it usually is not the first time. So then it comes across as if the person is overly confident and a bit show-offy.
I always say, we have been unable to locate another report of this type. A reviewer may say, well, here it is.
I'd like to make another point is that, if you publish a lot, if you're theoretical, etc., and you publish a lot, here's something that one of my advisors told me when I was a fresh PhD and I just started working. He says, 10 good papers. You get one bad paper, all of them get published, people will remember you for your bad paper, they will not remember you for your good one. So be careful, don't get a bad one published. Because human nature, hey, this guy published this thing, piece of junk. All the 10 other things you had done, no. Remember the bad paper. So if with grant pressures and this, that, the other, or for getting a job, or for tenure, or whatever, be careful, don't try to get one in, which is not very good. Just giving you tips as you go along.
Sometimes you have good work but you can't get published.
Well, then just, I've done that many a time. Now I'm going to tell you secrets. I hope he's videotaping. Ouch. Just send it to another journal, but don't send it at the same time. Wait for it to get rejected. I have had papers that, send it to a journal, get rejected, send it to another journal, it goes to the same person. Oh, rats. And he says, hey, I got this paper from another journal, scratch that and try another one. Things happen.
But I would add to that though, because journals, unless they reject without review, which can happen, usually send it out to review. And if you get reviews back and you have not modified your manuscript in any way, shape, or form, that is the wrong, and then because it's a small community, and
Yes.
maybe you will get the same reviewer from this other journal asking them to review it. And if their comments were constructive and they were good and you ignored them, and they see nothing has changed, they're going to lambaste you in that review.
And some of the words are not very, what can I say, very pleasant, for want of a better phrase.
You have to remember though that rejection from journals is not just your science, and because there could be other criteria going on, like how many articles they could fit within their journal, and then it falls with how your research fits within that journal. And so sometimes, rejection is not necessarily that the science is not good, or it could be as it's not as broad applicable as the journal that you targeted. And you also have to remember not to, easier said than done, not to take the rejection personally. It's not, they're not rejecting you.
Yeah, that's very hard. That's very hard to do, if I might interject. But
It is.
yes.
But you have to, and you can brood for a few days, and you can sulk for a few days, but you need to get over that, because at least in the sciences, or at least it's you're putting yourself out there. You are submitting manuscripts, you are submitting grants, and you will be rejected. And if you do not have the courage to get up and keep going and believe in yourself, then you will not survive. Because, and then the thing is, the more manuscript you submit of good quality, the more will be accepted, right? You can, and the more grants you try, the more will be accepted. And there is a learning curve too. You know, it does sometimes become easier as you go along. But having said that, you should be very happy with every product that you finish. And unlike the, you know, if you go back to your grade school pictures and or your like a poem you wrote in first grade, and you may be sentimental, but you might say, "Oh, I can't believe I wrote that." For manuscripts in science, you should be at a level right now that every manuscript you should be proud of, and no matter when you did it, if it was as an undergraduate or a graduate student, or as a beginning faculty, that you should be proud of your work. Otherwise, it shouldn't leave. You know, you shouldn't have submitted it, and so it should be. Yeah, and then one other thing, and then I'll let other people talk, is at least, you know, we talked earlier about professions, and so when I started science, I thought, well, I like to write, so, you know, that's going to be an easy part of this field. Well, I would say that science article writing is like writing legalese, although I've never been a lawyer, but we can ask, and that is because every word counts, and every sentence counts. And you have to say exactly what you mean and not something else. And having said that, that shouldn't terrify you from writing. Just, you know, write. You could always edit. But when you edit, you scrutinize every sentence. Is this exactly what you meant to say? Is that the interpretation of the data? Or are you overreaching the boundaries of what your information can say? Because it is very precise. And so it is, I would say it's not, it is difficult. It's not as easy as writing, you know, journalism writing. Because you're backing every sentence with data and with citations and with conclusions as opposed to just, you know, hand waving. But you do get better, and it does get easier the more you do it.
Let's look at the positive side of publishing. Okay, we've all talked about negative things. Let's look at the positive side. Finally, you worked and worked and worked, got the paper rewritten, it got published. Hey, you got published. Here's a big man, and here's your paper in between. There's nothing like an ego booster for it. Nothing. I'm telling you, nothing. I still remember my first paper when it came in. I was waiting for it to get, you know, in India, journals come in late. I was looking at it. I just saw my name. I didn't read the paper. Just saw the paper. Nothing like it. Ego booster. It took away all the pain and the suffering, or whatever you call it, all the working in the labs, the night labs, whatever. One paper in, and then I never looked back. You know, you got one, hey man, I'm greedy. 2, 3, 4. It sets you up.
Going back to the review process, just some helpful hints and observations. First of all, as an editor, I have control in my journal over the comments that I send back to the authors, and so one of the things that I do when and I've got about 14 waiting right now, is I'll look at every review and read it, and our reviews are usually pretty short, so it's not too bad, unless somebody adds an addendum to it, which they can upload many sheets of paper, which is not good for you. But looking at those things, I redact anything that's personal, anything that's hateful, anything that's out of line. I can go in and wipe it out so that you never see the comment that says this person's the worst dumbass I've ever met, you know, or something like that. The second thing is that when you do get your reviews and you do modify your manuscript, as Dr. Boulay said, we ask for two things. We ask for a list of the corrections that you've made in response to the review comments, so that for each comment there should be a response from you telling what you did or whether you have a rebuttal against the review comment. And then the last thing we do is we ask you to upload a copy of your manuscript showing where you made the changes by highlighting. And so when I get a revised manuscript submitted back through our electronic processing system, first thing I do is I pull down the list of your responses, see how they match with the review comments. Then I pull up your manuscript that's supposedly highlighted or in red, green, or orange or something, and make sure that what you said you did, you actually did. You'd be surprised, every now and then, maybe 2%, maybe 5%, people say they do it, and then when you go and look at the revised manuscript, they haven't done it. In which case, I take it, put it back into the system, and send it back to them with a terse response that you did not make the changes that you promised that you did. Which says basically that you tried to be dishonest and we know it. And so you don't want to get in that situation. The second thing, if the review comments are unusually harsh, but you've tried your best to overcome them with maybe an extra experiment or two, or maybe reinterpreting your data, whatever the case might be, then I may send your manuscript back to the reviewers and say, how do they do? Do they answer your questions? Some reviewers respond with, yes, they took care of it, and some want to review it again. And so you get another round of comments, and then that's where you really have to apply your editorial skills, because are the new things really of substance that would require this author to have to rewrite it again, or are they just nitpicking things? How many of you have ever taken a programming course like Fortran, or a do loop, where you get in a loop and you forget to put an exit command, exit on something? You could get in a do loop in these things, sending the review comments back, getting revised manuscripts, and back and forth and back, can go on forever. And so the responsibility of an editorial person is to come in and cut it off and say, okay, that's good enough. Sometimes I'll get review comments on the revised manuscript that aren't worth sending back. But the reviewer is a zealot and cannot let it go. Just cannot let it go. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that you might not be aware of, that I hope that I've told you.
I just wanted to add that I don't know if you've thought what your career paths are, or if you will continue in academia or not, but I think you owe it to yourself and also to your advisor, although you may not think about it that way, to publish your work. Because if you, after being graduate students, you decide life happens, or another career opportunity opens up and you walk away from academia or even from this field, you may feel as if, or you may lose interest in publishing your work. The thing is, then, in some ways, it's not fair. You're doing an injustice to the field, because your information, whether it is negative results or not, is not out there for everybody to learn from and to continue forward from that. And then you may not think about it, but your advisor has invested a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of effort into your research, and if your publication does not come out, then they suffer as well. So I think you owe it, even if you do not continue on in any kind of relevant discipline, to finish this, and finishing it is publishing. Because a dissertation, although there is you can access, we file our dissertations electronically with a service, that's not a publication, that's not a peer-reviewed publication. And so finish this journey by publishing your work, and then decide where you're going to move on to, but do it right, just finish right.
I like to add in a word for the editor is king, for want of a better phrase. Let me give you a couple of examples. Earlier on.
Let me add this too.
All right, so I'll stop.
The editor is the king, but I also submit manuscripts, and somebody gets to be the king.